I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay. All right. So a lot of you might be, well, obviously you're not all going to probably use the same tools I used, but a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you is stuff that that you can either use in other tools or with whatever app you're using, or at least give you some concepts for the way that I deal with my photos. So I thought we'd start with a portrait first. So my goddaughter Audra, or Willow, Audra's here, so we're going to edit Willow's photo, Audra. I was trying to do her senior pictures on the trip we took to Maine, and we went to see this great lighthouse. What was the name of that lighthouse, Charlotte? Can you talk on the
Doubling light.
Doubling Lighthouse? Yeah. So I'm just gonna turn that off to save processing power. So we went to Doubling Lighthouse. We're shooting a sunset shot and her senior pictures, and this is a shot I shot there. I didn't really have like a lot of lighting, and I had used the flash a couple times trying to make the exposure on her face a little brighter, but the flash just didn't look that great because all I brought was a single flash that was on my camera, and it didn't look that good. So I knew that if I shot the shot in RAW, and those of you that know what that is, it's kind of some of your cameras can shoot RAW, and when you shoot in RAW, it allows you to adjust the contrast and the color temperature and the brightness and stuff of the photo after the fact, better than if you just took a shot that was like a JPEG shot. So this allows me a little control in post to change the photo. It's not an excuse for shooting a bad photo and then fixing it, but just because of my experience with shooting, I knew that I would be able to brighten this shot and make it look better. So this is the shot itself. This is the original before I edited it at all. And so I'm just going to start editing it, and I'll kind of go through what I'm doing as I do it. So the first thing I noticed that I kind of wished was a little better was that I want the picture centered, right? So the problem is this lighthouse at the end of that walkway or its pier is a little bit to the right. So it's actually not straight on its own in nature the way it is. So it kind of throws my eye off a bit. So, but it turns out I shot the shot pretty good already. You can see her face is pretty much dead center. So by eye, I had nailed that part. The bottom piece of wood there where the gap is a little off to the right. So that bothers me. And then the lighthouse is a little off to the right. So that's just an adjustment you can make on your own. I will probably bring this in just a little bit, which makes her face a little off to the left slightly, but brings the wood and the lighthouse over a little bit, which just helps my eye a bit. It's not weird like that. So in Lightroom, the first thing I'm going to do, and whether you're using Snapseed on your phone or whatever, you probably all have this auto button of some kind that will automatically tweak your picture. Lightroom does a pretty good job of that. So I'm going to hit auto, and then you'll see what it does to the photo. It actually brought up a lot of the darks, and it changed quite a few things. Usually I tweak this. I don't love what it does out of the box. So I'll hit it to kind of get a reference, and then I start messing with it. So I definitely want to bring this photo up quite a bit. So I'm going to make this more like, I don't know, 1.2. I'm going to raise the exposure to 1.2. And then most of the other settings, I don't like what it does. So not 100%. So it did the highlights minus 80 roughly. I'm going to make that more like minus 40. I'm going to leave the shadows. Wait, no, I'm going to raise that a little bit more. So I'm going to raise that to 60. And then the whites were okay. I'm just going to lower that a little bit. And again, none of this is a science. It's just a matter of you figuring out what you like in your photos, and each photo is different. So I do each photo differently. I usually raise the saturation a little bit. The vibrance is about where I wanted it. Cheating a little bit because I've already edited this photo, so I knew what some of the settings were, but sometimes I spend a little more time playing around with those settings because I'm not sure what I want until I see it. So just to give you an idea though, those are pretty much the settings that I did the first time around. So Willow had just gotten her hair done for this, and it's this pretty red kind of color. And I wanted to bring her face up a little bit. So in most of the tools that you might use, including Lightroom, there's a masking tool where you can take a brush and you can kind of paint light, remove light, change color, that kind of stuff to a photo. So I'm going to use this paintbrush to just kind of, and I'm going to check this little box down here in Lightroom that shows me where it's painting. It'll show some red. And I'm just going to do her face and her hands. So all the skin tones right there and her face. I'm just going to highlight that a little bit. And then you'll notice I'm going to switch over and, oh, this auto mask feature is already on. So auto mask, what it does is it kind of knows where the edge of her head is, and it'll paint just up to the edge so that I'm just making all of that red. And then you'll see I went over the line a little bit there. So I'm going to hit the Alt key, which makes it subtract the brush. And I'm just going to take away what I went over a little bit there. And same thing down by her hands on her sweater, because I want it to just be on the skin tones in her hair. And then I'm going to turn the red off so that I can see what adjustments the brush is making. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to raise the exposure a little bit more on her face there. So I just did that 0.3. It looks pretty good. Let's see what 0.6 looks like. Yeah, I think that actually looks pretty good. So that brought her face out pretty decent. And then I am going to raise the saturation a little bit on her face and the hair just to highlight that. So I'm going to give that maybe like a 6. Well, let's try like 10. So what I'll do is I'll do that and then just flip it back and forth and see if I like what it did. Again, it's a very experimental process. All right. And then I'm going to click done on that, and that's kind of saved. There's a couple things you might want to check on your photos, again, depending on your camera and your software and what you're using. But Lightroom actually has some features for correcting lens, doing profile corrections to your lens. So for example, if you're using a wide angle, the picture might be a little bit bowed and it might distort the way the person looks. By clicking that, it'll fix that. And it'll also take away the natural, what do we call that? Charlotte, what do you call it with the darkness around the edge of a photo? I forgot what we call that. Huh? Vignette, yeah. So the vignette that would be there naturally. Oh, I got to admit these people into the room. Shoot. Here we go. Sorry, I got to let people in. Must be an easier way to do that. Participants. All right, I think everybody's in that was coming, or that's waiting.
Chris, wait, how did you decide to use, what do you say, Lighthouse? Like, why did you choose that instead of a different program?
Oh, you mean Lightroom?
Lightroom, why is that your favorite?
Well, Well, I've always been a Photoshop expert. Like that's how I've designed websites and stuff like that for years. And when
Okay.
Lightroom came out and I got into photography, Lightroom just has a lot of tools that are just that make like editing photos and editing them in bulk very easy.
Okay.
But everything you're seeing me do in Lightroom, you could do in Photoshop, and I actually know how to do in Photoshop as well. But I prefer Lightroom for editing, and we are going to still use Photoshop. We're going to go over to Photoshop in a minute.
Okay.
For some of the other tools that are over there that I need.
I'm
One
gonna
of
be quiet now.
No, you don't be quiet. The questions are good. It helps me out a little bit. The one thing about Photoshop that Photoshop does that Lightroom doesn't is if you need to do anything with layers. So if you're gonna take a photo and make a change and then layer it on top of another, or if you're gonna superimpose something or whatever, Lightroom doesn't do stuff like that. So you still end up in Photoshop for certain things one way or the other.
So everything, Chris, this is Julie.
Yep.
Everything that you do to this photo now, do you save a raw copy of it before you start working on it, or
Yeah.
everything here undoable?
Everything we're doing is undoable,
Okay.
up until a point. So at some point, I'm going to move from Lightroom over
Okay.
to Photoshop, and when I do that and I bring the picture back, at that point you're kind of locked.
Okay.
So whatever you did before you leave Lightroom is undoable, and my original image is always here. On the bottom right here, you'll notice I have a reset button, and if I hit reset, boom, the picture's back to the way it was.
Okay.
And but once I export to Photoshop and it comes back, it's going to come back as a TIFF file. So
Okay.
you won't be able to edit it, the original stuff. So if I ever want to change anything earlier than when I exported it to Photoshop or another application, then I have to come back, do the edit again, then export it again, and then edit there again, and bring it back. So at this point, I've done pretty much what I want to do here on in Lightroom. I am going to do one last little thing. There's this little bit of a branch that's sticking out on the top right corner of this. I might have missed this on the picture I actually published. I'm going to erase that. So Lightroom has a nice feature for, getting rid of imperfections, and, if you had a spot in your lens or something like that, you can just use it to click over things and get rid of it. So I don't know if you noticed that, but I just got rid of that little bit of branch that was sticking there because that was kind of bothering me. So
Is that a heel or is that a clone stamp?
that's a heel.
Okay.
Well, they call it spot removal in Lightroom.
Okay. All right.
But it's a similar idea to a clone stamp or a heel in Photoshop as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Except it's more like heel, not clone. Clone would be I took something from another spot. Actually, I think it is more like clone, because you notice when I clicked it, like if I click something, watch this, when I do it, you'll see it grabs a second circle and it's grabbing it from another spot and kind of superimposing it. But it's not an exact copy of it. It's and if you move that, you can change what it's using for the sample. So I don't know if it's exactly like clone or not, because clone would actually clone what's there. This doesn't. It seems to kind of draw the environment from where the other circle is and inserts it in that spot.
Thanks.
So similar idea. All right, so happy with this the way it is in Lightroom at this point. I always do my vignette and stuff like that in Lightroom when I'm done, so I'll end up back in Lightroom to do that on the final image. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to Photoshop because I want to use some other tools on it. So I'm going to go to Edit in Photoshop 2021. So I want to make sure I didn't miss something. Yeah. So this brings the photo over to Photoshop. And the reason I want to use Photoshop is mainly because I want the layers feature, and I'm going to show you why. So what I want to do over here in Photoshop is, if we get way in on her face, which nobody's ever really going to blow it up this much. Oh, and I forgot to remove the mosquito on her forehead. We'll do that back in, I'm just going to go back and do that in Lightroom right now.
Which camera were you shooting with?
This was with the Canon R5, the new mirrorless version.
Woohoo!
Yeah, it's a pretty nice camera.
It sure is.
And I did get all new lenses for it and everything, so I upgraded my entire kit.
I'm still working on that one.
So anyway, if we look here, we got this huge mosquito on our forehead. So this is another spot where this spot removal tool comes in real handy. I have it way too big at the moment. 1 second. Come on, there we go. So for those of you that do use Lightroom, if you hit Shift, you can kind of change the threshold of the edges of it. So I'm just doing that so I get a cleaner spot there. And I'm just going to click the bug, and you'll see it gets rid of the mosquito. Now we'll take it over to Lightroom. Or Photoshop, sorry. Yeah, now we got rid of our bug. All right, so there's a couple things about this. Because it was dark and I made it brighter, you can see there's a little noise on her face. And then also for portraits, it's nice to kind of clean up the face and make it the skin look a little better and that kind of thing. However, while Willow has some very beautiful freckles and we don't want to destroy those. So there's a fine line between cleaning up the face and destroying the freckles and natural imperfections that you want to keep. So I have this plugin called, this is another one. So I made a list of these. I'll put this in the description or something later so everybody can see them, but there's a few tools that I use that I'll be using today. And one of them is called Imagenomics Noiseware. So I'm going to go over to Filter and Imagenomics, and I'm going to use Noiseware. Or no, actually, I'm not going to use Noiseware. This is Portraiture, sorry. Oh, and I made one more error, forgot. So I also always make a second layer. So in Photoshop, I'm taking the original picture, I'm putting it on a second layer. We're going to make the edit to the second layer, not the first layer. And I'll show you why I do that before we're done. So now I'm going to go to Filter, Portraiture. And I always start with like default settings. I let the program do what it does best and just try to give it a moment to see if it does what I think is a good job. I'm going to zoom this in so I can see her face because that's the most important part for this part of it. And we'll see what it does once this progress bar at the bottom completes. You'll see it's at 70%, 80%. All right, so that gives you an idea what it's going to do. If I hit this button at the bottom here, I can see 2 copies of it, and we can see the before and the after. It actually does a pretty good job right out of the gate. I don't like that it left some of the freckles are still a little too, it muted some of them a little too much, but I do like what it did with some of the noise. So I'm going to change some of the effects here a little bit. See if I can smooth it normal here. And again, every time you make a change, you have to wait for this progress bar. It's a pretty intense calculation for the computer, and these images are, I think this camera does 45 megapixels, so they're pretty big. Yeah, so that one did too much with the freckles. I'm not liking that it's wiping a lot of the freckles out or making them too faint. So I'm going to switch back to default. And I'm just going to change the smoothing down to about, I think I did about 68, 70. I'll let that refresh and see how that looks. That's a little better. Yeah, there we go. I like that a little better. And again, a lot of this stuff, like I don't know the exact meaning behind each setting, although I have looked some of them up depending on what I'm doing. But a lot of times it's just experimenting to see if it's giving me what I want. That did help a little bit. I still think it did too much to the freckles, so I'm going to pull it down even more. It's funny, when I was editing this and it wanted to wipe the freckles away, I could just hear Audra going, no. So I don't know if she wants them gone or not, but I'm assuming not. All right, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to hit OK to that, and it's going to make those changes to that layer. So it's only on the second layer in Photoshop right now. And if we turn off the second layer, you can see the original below it and what it did. You can kind of see those changes. I don't know if you're going to notice it through Zoom. I don't know if it's zoomed in enough for you to see it or if it's clear enough for you to see it, but it definitely makes a pretty big difference. Now, another thing I noticed is that there's some noise in the background of the shot, and Portraiture pretty much works on skin tones and whatnot. So I am going to do something to the noise in the background as well, but we'll get to that in a second. So this is pretty good. I'm liking this. So I'm going to leave that layer there. I'm going to take another copy of this layer and I'm going to make a third copy. And the third copy, I'm going to zoom out so we can just look at the noise in the background of the photo here. And if we turn off these two layers, you can see the noise that's in the lighthouse and some of the darks in the background. It's not too bad, but if you were going to print this very large or do a large print of it or whatever, it would look a lot better if you get rid of that noise. Some people like the noise, they consider it a good grain or whatever, but I like for the shots to be really clean. So I am going to go ahead and take this third layer now, and now I'm focusing on the background and the noise. So I'm going to use another plugin called Noiseware. And Noiseware, I'm not going to care what it does to the face at all. The face, it's going to make it look all pasty and kind of ceramic-y looking. You can see it on the right here. See how it kind of makes it look fake? Some people might like that look. I'm trying to keep a little bit of her natural beauty in there. I don't want to like mess it up. But you'll notice what it does here though. So on this dark area of the photo in the back, you see the noise on the left versus the noise on the right. That's a huge difference, and I consider that to be a pretty big improvement. So I'm going to zoom this out a little bit so I can see some of the other details and just make sure it's not messing anything up. And I do like what that's doing pretty much right out of the gate. Noiseware usually nails it. I don't have to make too many changes, but I will try landscape mode real quick just to see how that looks.
I really like that change.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Wow.
And again, especially if you were going to print it big. So
That's a plug-in, huh?
Yep. And they're not too expensive. Like I said, I'll leave a list so you can go check them out.
Great.
And I'm just going to look at a few other areas of the photos just to see what it did. Make sure it looks good there as well. Yeah, I'm liking what that did quite a bit. So all this noise that you're seeing in this wood right here is gone over here, but it maintained the quality of the image just fine. So I'm going to hit OK to that. So now we've got a third layer in Photoshop. And what do we do with these? So since on this layer, I don't like what it does to her face, I'm going to turn the top layer off for a minute. I'm going to focus on the face layer. So the face layer, even though we corrected it, I liked where it was in Portraiture, I do back this off a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the mask tool in Photoshop, which is this guy down here. You click that, and what that does is it makes it so that anything you paint in black on this layer will expose what's below it. So if you watch this little white window that's on this layer over on the right-hand side, I'm going to click the black paintbrush. Where are you? There we go. And I've just got black selected. And then here's a paintbrush. And I'm just going to make the brush the size I want. If you hold Alt and then slide your mouse, it'll give you that option. And I like what it did to the hair. I only want to change what it did to the face, basically. So I'm going to set the opacity to about 50%, I think. Yeah, we'll do 50%. There we go. Close enough. And I'm just going to paint her face, basically, with that brush. And when I let go, you'll see it's got a little black mark over there. And what that did was it reduced how much of the corrections that I did on that layer are actually being applied to her face. So let's paint that in a little better.
So you're painting that one on the noise layer?
Yeah, on the noise layer, what I'm doing is I'm removing about 50% of it.
Okay,
So it's kind of applying the changes I did to the lower layer, but only 50% of it.
okay.
All right. And just enough so that, like I said, I can't zoom this little window in, but if you can see over there, that little dot, it's showing where I just painted that. So you can tell what's going on there.
Okay.
And then, so now I want to turn the third layer back on, which was, we really went and did the Noiseware correction for the background on that one. And on this one, I'm going to hit the masking tool again. And I want all of that to stay 100%, but I want none of it on her face. So I'm going to come to the opacity of the brush, and I'm just going to completely paint away any part of the face that it touched. So that last one won't affect her face at all. And again, this is very finite detail. You might not be able to tell, but it really wiped away that ceramic-y, pasty look that it gave her face. And you'll see over on the right in the little mask window, it's kind of, the area where I was painting is much darker, and that's because we're doing it at a full 100%. And I'm just going to make sure I get all the way out to the edge and just paint away anywhere on her skin and her hair where it had done the Noiseware, because we just really want that for the background, not for her face. Okay. So that's pretty much all I'm going to use Photoshop for on this particular picture. And you'll see now that we have a, her face is cleaned up a little bit. You still get the freckles, and then the rest of the picture in the background, all that noise is gone. So I'm a big fan of that. In Photoshop, to go back to Lightroom, all you've got to do is close it. It's going to say, do you want to save it? You say yes, and then it'll save it alongside of your original image in Lightroom. So now if we come back to Lightroom, we can see here's our TIFF file that it just generated and kicked out. And just to make sure that's the right one. Yeah, that's the right one. So yeah, I'm okay with the image so far. I don't think there's really anything else I'm going to use to edit that outside of Photoshop. Oh, yes, I am. So you can mess around in Lightroom, and you can do a lot of looks and stuff. And Lightroom has its own libraries of features and whatnot. But I really have gotten into this app called Luminar from Skylum. I used to use Luminar 4. It's the old version. And then they recently came out with a Luminar AI, which is a really smart, you can do pretty much everything you could do in the original Luminar 4, but Luminar AI kind of makes some decisions for you. It does a little bit more fancy things for you, and then you can still adjust it if you want. So I'm going to go to Luminar AI here. I'm going to edit a copy with my Lightroom adjustments, and it's going to bring up this other app called Luminar AI. And I just really liked the way on the particular filter I used, the way it just made her pop a little bit. So I'm going to pull that up. And this one's actually saves me a lot of time, because normally I would be doing this in Lightroom very painstakingly, like by hand with a brush and that kind of thing. And this particular, unfortunately, I don't remember which one I used, so we're going to have to look at a couple of them until I pick it. There we go, easy portraits. I think it was highlight key. Yeah, that's it. So this one, to preview, you can just click this button, and you can see the highlight key, what it does to it. Do you see the change there?
Yeah.
So this is the original, and then this is the one after. And it really does a nice job of kind of making the lighthouse pop a little bit. It makes her pop a little bit. It brought the wood out. It really exposes her hair a little bit. So I really liked this this particular high key filter that it did to it. And then you can click edit on it and you can dive in and change it a little more. I did want to bring it back a little bit on the light here for her face. So I'm going to change this contrast just slightly. I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little bit. Yeah, that's too much. I was going to go with -0.2. Yeah, there we go. I think that was about the only change I made to that one. This app though does some crazy, like you can insert sun rays and glows and birds and, you know, just it does really cool stuff. So definitely worth checking out. So I'm just going to apply that and it's going to bring it back again. So now what we're going to have in Lightroom is we're going to have the original photo. We're going to have the one that came out of Photoshop. And then we're going to have this one after it's been exported from Luminar AI. So you'll see down here at the bottom, I now should have another, yeah. So now we have a Luminar AI edit.tip. You can see, I can't point with my other finger to show you because I got to leave the mouse there for you to see it. But the file name that's right above the row of pictures, it says edit to Luminar AI -edit. So that's our edit out of Luminar. So I'm really liking the way this photo looks so far. I think that's about where I left off. So the last thing I would do, and I would do this in Lightroom, is I'll come in here to do my vignette. And I don't know why. I can do the vignette in other apps, but I just like doing it right before I'm gonna save the image and where I would the image that I would actually print from. I like to do this at the last step in Lightroom because sometimes when I'm printing, I adjust the vignette. So sometimes when I actually go to print it, I don't like the way the vignette looks. So I will, I want to be able to change that on the fly just for printing, depending on what I'm printing and what I'm printing on. So that just makes it easier for me to adjust that at the last minute that way. So for this one, I mean, here's an extreme. I'll show you an extreme. So that's like a -50 vignette. I usually land around 35. And I think that looks pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But that really highlights her and it kind of darkens the wood a little bit, but it makes her center of the shot. But actually I'm feeling like that's a little too much. So I'm going to make it like 25, I think. And that's pretty much it for that shot. There are normally some other things I would do with some shots if it wasn't so dark. So if her face wasn't so dark when I started and there was less noise and less grain, then I'd probably also go in and I would actually do the whites of her eyes and the color of her eyeballs and all that. But because this portrait, her face isn't very large in the portrait, I'm not too concerned about that because it's kind of going to be far away and nobody's going to really notice those details anyway. And the more that I tweak those details in her eyes, it's going to make it more grainy and that kind of thing. Oops. Looks great black and white too, right? All right, so that's a portrait and kind of what I go through to edit that and the apps that I use to edit it. And any questions about that one in particular?
There was one question. Sometimes when I'm taking pictures of other people, like there's a stray hair hanging down or something on the forehead. And I noticed she had a little bitty one on her forehead. It's not anything I would probably fix on her.
Yeah.
But what would you do? See that one that goes right over her eyebrow? There's like 4 or 5 little strands of hair. What would it take to remove that in Lightroom?
So in Lightroom, I would just use that same spot removal tool. I'll do it right now. I'm going to leave it because I thought it was fine, but
Oh yeah, it's
I understand what you're saying. Like sometimes that would bother me too, but you can just try to remove it with the spot removal tool. That did not work so well with Lightroom. Lightroom's spot removal tool is very limited. So
okay.
if I really wanted that gone, that would be a jump back to Photoshop.
Okay.
Let me try it though one more time because sometimes the problem is that you make the brush too big. So I'm going to make it really fine and I'm just going to very carefully trace this hair and it might do a better job this time. And then there's one other thing I can do to it too to try to make it better. All right, so it did do a little bit better job that time when I made the brush smaller, but it's still going to mess it up a little bit. Like it pulled it from over there. So what you can try to do is you can try to grab the sampling it's taking and move it to somewhere else from her forehead. So for example, right about there, maybe.
Okay.
And let's hit done and just see what that looks like. So it did okay. You can still see a little distortion there, so I don't really love it.
Right, I see.
Whoops, let me zoom in like crazy there. There's another trick too, which is that now that I did that first one, I could always take the spot removal tool again, and I could make it a little bit fuzzier on the edge, meaning that I'm going to shrink that inner circle by hitting shift and scrolling my mouse. And I could kind of go over it again now. And now it would pull another sample and lay it over the top, and you might see it even less. So actually that looks pretty good right now.
Okay, cool.
So Lightroom did pull it off, but if it ever gets like, you know, complicated, then I'll take it over to Photoshop and I'll have to get granular.
Good. So it is possible, but it might be a little bit of work to do it in Lightroom.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
However, I'm going to turn those off because I thought the hair was.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's absolutely
know.
fine.
So, well, actually, now maybe I don't like it. I don't know. Do I keep or get rid of that hair? I don't know. Yeah, it's true. I did already post it. So, yeah, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. The hair didn't bother me before, but now that I'm staring at it, you know, it could be a little annoying.
If you lose sleep tonight, you can blame it on me.
Yeah. There is also, just to mention it, in Lightroom, if you only have Lightroom and you need to do some noise reduction, I do want to point out that there is noise reduction in Lightroom. The tool, it's right below sharpening. If you were to set that to like maybe, if I'll do an extreme, maybe like 50, you'll see it can do noise removal, but it's not as strong as Imagenomics Noiseware. Noiseware is specifically made to do noise. Like they focus their whole life on that plugin with removing noise. And it does a better job than Lightroom in almost every case. But I do use noise reduction in Lightroom every once in a while just to get rid of some noise or to do a section of an image or something like that. But yeah, so that's that. And then I would just go to export the image, and I'll either do it with my signature or not, depending on what type of image it is. All right, so next one is a landscape shot, and this is of the lighthouse itself. And this one is shot in HDR. So I don't know if you all know what HDR is, but HDR is where you actually shoot. Oh, wait, someone's waiting in the room there. Okay, got him. So HDR is actually where you're taking multiple shots. They can be anywhere from 2 shots to 3 shots to 5 shots, 10 shots, however many shots you want to layer together. It doesn't work when shooting people, or I would have done that for Willow because then her face could have been bright as well as the background and whatnot, and I wouldn't have had so much noise. But with people, because they're breathing or they move, and even the slightest movement in one of those multiple shots that you're taking would cause ghosting and that kind of thing. So really HDR is meant for, at least photography wise, still photos is better done on things that are still. The nice thing about these apps that do the, I got to find the original image here real quick. Hold on. So this was 334, 332, 335. Sorry for the delay here. I just got to find the original image. One, two, three, four, 2. All right, so I think it's these 3. All right, so these are my 3 bracketed photos. I shot 3. So the idea here is that you've got one that's at normal exposure, which is the center one, and then you've got one at -1 stop, and then you have a third photo that's at +1 stop. And the idea here is that we're going to capture the extremes of the light and the extremes of the darkness so that you can merge them together to get a picture where all the colors are super balanced. So we'll take these 3 shots. And for this, I used, I actually have 2 HDR programs I use. One is called Photomatix. Let me add that to the list here. This is the one I used for years and years and years. Most of my landscape shots that you see were done with Photomatix, but I've recently adopted this other one called Aurora HDR. Aurora HDR. I think that's spelled right. I'll make sure it's spelled right when we put the list out. So I'm just going to mark these with stars so I know what they are. If you just hit 1 through 5 in Lightroom, it'll give them a number of stars. So those are my 3 images. Oh no, I did the wrong one there. That one. All right. So with this one thing I will do before I export to Aurora HDR, and then I do all my editing after I merge the HDR photos. Lightroom, because these are shot in RAW, you can set what profile. So when I shot these, I shot them in my camera. I had told it landscape, but when you bring it into Lightroom, it just uses the profile Adobe Color. So I will switch this to landscape for that photo, and I'm going to switch it to landscape for this photo, which this is basically a replica of the setting in your camera. So I had told it I wanted landscape in the camera, and I just want that to be conveyed here before I spit it out to the HDR program. So once I've done that, I'm gonna, and really there's other things too, like leveling this shot a little bit and changing the composition. I'll do all that after I merge the photo. But I'm gonna highlight all 3 photos. I'm gonna right click them, and I'm gonna say edit in, or I'll do export, export to Aurora HDR with my Lightroom adjustments, which means that that landscape setting I just did is gonna come over with it. And you'll see Aurora is showing me the 3 images, and it shows that one is -1, one is 0, and one is +1. So it knows what that is. Auto alignment, I'm not going to hit. You would only do that if you were, if it moved a little bit, or you shot them handheld and you need them aligned. But I'm not going to turn it on if it doesn't need it, because this was an actual tripod shot, so I already know that they're exact. A couple other quick settings: ghost reduction. If you had any moving things like a person walked through your shot or something, it'll help with that. And then this arbitration reduction. This is helpful if you have, like, and I did on my other lighthouse shot, I used that because there was some leaves in the right side, and the sun was kind of coming through the leaves, and it was putting this red nasty glow behind them. And clicking that will remove that glow a little bit and help it. But in this case, it's good to go right here. So I'm just going to hit create HDR. You can also merge HDRs in Lightroom, but I was doing HDR way before Lightroom offered that feature, and I've just completely disregarded it. I have no idea how to use it. It might be great, it might not be. I just never played with it because I like these programs because they literally focus on HDR. It's their bread and butter, so they usually do a really good job. Now, once you get here, you can start making edits, all on your own. You can choose from these collections at the bottom. They call them collections. There's an essential pack. There's a landscape pack. You can buy more packs. It's got all these looks and stuff that you can do. An artist who you might want to look up, Trey Ratcliffe. I'm going to write that down for you guys on the list too. He offers a lot of these classes and stuff for real, like he does it for a living. And he's an amazing photographer. Some people feel his HDR is a little too in your face, but I learned a lot of what I do from him. But anyway, he contributed to this program. So the people that make the software used him for as a consultant to get the software to do exactly what it needs to be done. So anyway, you can just choose through these. You click through them and see if there's any that you like. Find one that's pretty close to kind of what you want it to look like, and see if any of these fit your fancy. If the one I kind of liked, I think, was probably the warm landscape. I think that's about where my image was. I'm going to go look at the final product here real quick just to see which way I went with that. That's close. And then from there, you can come over here on the right and you can start messing with it even more. So if you want to add a little clarity to it, which I definitely did do, that'll make things pop a little more, make the clouds a little more, it's hard to describe what clarity does. Here, I'll kick it all the way up and you can see it. You see how the wood, like just watch the wood when I change this. See how it really shows off the grain in there? It like makes details come out and pop kind of in your face a bit. So you got to be careful with this setting because you'll make it look really weird. But I do like to have a little bit of it in there. And then on the previous image, I did kind of go through quite a few of these settings and I tweaked a few of them. The main one I think was the exposure a little bit. I wanted to bring the exposure up just a tad. Nope, that was too much. There we go. And then, but yeah, so it's now merged the images for me. I do most of my edits in Lightroom, so I'm not going to play with this too much. I just like this software for how well it does the merge of the three images and how it brings all the colors out and the details out. So I'm not going to mess with this a whole lot in here, but feel free to play with this app. It does so much cool stuff. So you can really choose a lot of different looks and all kinds of stuff with this app. It's amazing. But I'm going to hit apply because now it's merged my images and I'm happy with that. It'll take it a second, but once it gets back to Lightroom, then we'll finish tweaking it. All right. And then it lands me on the final image that it exported. And you can see again in the file name on the bottom there, it shows Aurora HDR edit.tiff. So we know that that's the one we're on. I usually increase the number of stars so I know that I'm on my final image now. So I'll hit 5 on that just so I know that's the one I'm going to print from and whatnot. Oh, actually, I shouldn't have done that because we're still going to do noise reduction, so we're not done. All right. So in Lightroom, a few things I did to this photo. So one thing that bothered me was that the color coming from the sun and the clouds and like the purple and all that stuff, I felt like it was making the white on the oh, this isn't even the same image, guys. I really messed this up. This is not the right one. What happened here? Where is my original image? Well, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the same principle, but this is the original image. So it's actually shot way further back. Yeah, I got to find the original one. I apologize. Hold on. We're just going to delete that because that's going to confuse me. Where is the original? $34. Oh, I see. 34, 35, 36. Okay. One more time, I'm just going to buzz through this quick and we'll have the right image. So it's actually these 3 images. I apologize. And choose that warm landscape filter again. And then I'll hit apply to that and take us back to Lightroom. And again, I did actually do some tweaks over here on the right in the original, but I don't want to bore you guys with all that. And that's all personal preference anyway. So when you guys go to do it yourself, you'll tweak it and make it look exactly the way you want. All right, so now we're back to the original shot. So I do want to raise the clarity on this picture just a little bit for the whole image. So you'll see over here in Lightroom, this is the feature I was talking about with the clarity button. The first thing I'm going to do though is hit auto on the adjustments. Oh, and I really like what it did with that. So it made a lot of the stuff quite a bit brighter. I am going to bring some of this down. So my rule for this is I always bring it down like about half of whatever it thinks it wanted to do. So if it says 50, I'm going to be like, nah, 30. And if it says my plus 29 white, I'm going to say more like 15. And for the blacks, I'll make that more like -8. So I kind of cut in half about what it does, and I just see how that looks. And if I like it, then that's good. I am going to go immediately to the crop tool and just make sure everything's centered the way I want. So I notice the lighthouse is a little bit off. So I'm going to bring that, I'm going to shrink it just a little bit so it's dead center. There we go. And then another thing you'll notice is this image might not be perfectly straight. So these boards, you can't really count on these boards to be a dead line, but you'll notice when you go to like twist it a little bit, if you look at the separation of the boards against that grid, you can kind of see that it wasn't really straight, so it did need to come right a little bit. And often with my camera, I do shoot with the horizontal leveler thing on, but then it'll still look weird just because of what's in the actual image. So I'm gonna just tweak that a little bit out there. All right, so now my eye isn't bugging out about whether it's level or not and that kind of thing. So from here, there's some tweaks you can do. I kind of like what it did with the leaves over here on the right and the hay, and or I don't know what kind of grass that is, but whatever that is over there, I think that looks pretty good. But I do think it could use a little bit of clarity. So I'm going to use clarity on the whole image in the first place. So I'm just going to give it maybe like 20. Now, I don't know if you can see the difference there, but like watch the wood grain and the clouds. You'll kind of see what it does. It brings more of like a higher detail, higher contrast, ominous kind of look. Like look at it at 100% and you'll see what it does. And then as you start to back it off, it really does make a pretty dramatic change. So I think the whole image could use about a 20 on the clarity. And then I'm going to take the brush and I'm just going to paint some clarity in over here on these on the foliage on the left here. And you can see if I turn that on, it'll show red where I'm painting, so you can see what it is you're doing. And I've left the auto mask on to make it really easy for me to get to the edges without overstepping. So you notice it's not painting on the rails and stuff on me. I can just kind of brush it. It does a pretty good job of not going over. But it did a little bit right there. So if you hit the Alt key, you can take the brush and you can take it back off of there and paint it away. Now, the one thing about using the auto mask is that if you see these little flecks in the red, that's because it's auto masking around that and you don't really want that. So sometimes I'll do the auto mask, get it so the edges are good, and then I'll turn off auto mask and I'll just paint over the center. That way it doesn't have any of those little spots where it kind of skipped. But I just stay away from the edge so that I don't mess up the edges. Just like that. And then if you come down here and you click this, you'll turn off the red, which was just showing you where you were painting basically. And from there, you can now edit just that foliage on the left and the right side of the dock. I can bring the shadows up, maybe say 15. I do like that, so I'm going to probably do that. Let's see, like 20. So that's the original. I think 15 actually was pretty good. And then I did want to add the clarity. So the clarity was the main thing I wanted to add. So I'm going to give that like a 20. There we go. Maybe 15. No, a little less. There we go. So that just makes the detail over there kind of pop a little more, and it gave it a little depth. So I like that. Hit done on that. All right. And then the thing I didn't like about the color of the sky and the sun and what it did to the rails, these rails are really white, you know, so I don't want to make them white because the color was there in the sky and it was casting color and whatnot, but I feel like they're a little purpley or a little pinkish. So I am going to grab my brush again. I'm going to hit auto mask over on the right to help me stay on the lines of the white there. And I'm going to paint these the white parts of the wood. I'm going to completely just paint that out. And I'm not too worried about going over the lines right now because I'm going to just fix that at the end. And this part's a little annoying and like tedious, but I'm going to paint that out shrink my brush a little bit for these smaller parts. Oops. Well, I'm really spilling over, aren't I? Go back and fix that in a second. Remember one time in kindergarten, my teacher said, "Why are you coloring outside the lines?" I said, "Well, we're going to cut it out anyway, right?" So I guess that still applies today for me. Anyway, all right. So now now that I got that basically colored in, I got some spillage. So you see I went over the line there. So I'm gonna just hit the Alt key to turn on the eraser to take this back off. And then I'll just go near these edges and I'll clean up where I spilled over. Has anybody ever done any masking and stuff like that yet? Or is this the first time you're kind of seeing this concept? Anybody?
I've done some of it before.
I'm painting and removing, just so you know, because I'm noticing little spots. But anyway, once you got most of that done, now what I can do is I can turn off the red so I can once again see what I'm actually going to change. So I'm turning off the red part. And now what I'm going to do is just come over here and I'm going to change, literally this trick is pretty simple. I'm just going to come to saturation and I'm going to do maybe -20. It looks pretty good. Minus, that's too much. So I'm going to do like -15, I think. Maybe -20 is better. Yeah, -20. And then you can also do little things like pop the exposure up a tad if you want. So that just made the railings pop a little bit, and it kind of removed that pink purplish haze that was on it. And then for the wood, I do like the clarity on the wood quite a bit. So I am going to paint the wood also. Turn on my thing so I can see the overlay. And I just like the way the grain pops when you have clarity on a little higher. So I'm just going to paint some of that in real quick. Okay. And then turn off the red so you can see what you're doing. And I'm going to just go ahead and give that probably like 30 clarity. So I don't know if you can see the difference there, but I'll turn it on and off. So there's with none. And here's, let's do 50 for kind of an extreme, and then we'll back it off. You see what that does to it? Just like really makes the wood pop.
I kind of like the extreme.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to try it. So I mean, we could even go up to 100 and just see how it looks. Yeah, even the 100 looks great. But I'm always wary of like, I don't want your eye to be too drawn to that wood, because really the highlight's the lighthouse, right? So I'm going to back it off just a little bit. I'm going to take it down to like 35. More like 30 actually. I just wanted a little bit. I didn't want to overdo it. You know what I mean? And that's another thing too, is that my original images when I was doing HDR and stuff, man, I was like, you could tell it was HDR. And a goal you might want to try to keep in mind when you're doing HDR or tweaking colors like this and stuff is that you don't want to do anything that, you know, you don't want people to, you want them to look at it and say, wow, that's a natural photograph. You know what I mean? I know people look at my stuff and they probably know it's not 100% natural, but it doesn't look fake either. I try to not make it look fake. So
No,
all
I
right.
think you do a really good job at that. I mean, I think that there are times that, you know, when people share photos out, that you can really, really tell that it's over processed.
Yep, over process is the word I'm looking for. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
All right, so one last thing I would do to this is I wanted the sky to be a little more dramatic and a little bit more color maybe. So one way we can kind of accomplish that is to take this, what's this filter, this thing called again? Oh, the graduated filter. And it's a nice feature in Lightroom for doing things like adjusting ground versus sky, or, you know, anything that you want to just tweak. So I'm just going to drop that in here. And what you're looking at right now is these three lines that you see. What they mean is the middle one is where it starts, and then it's going to gradually go up to about here until it's in full effect. And on the bottom, it would gradually go down until it's in full effect at the bottom. So you can make this as thick or as wide as you want based on how big you want the fade to be. So in this case, we're going to be going up. It's not bottom, so the bottom doesn't even really matter. But the distance between this dot and this center line and the top line is how wide the fade is going to be, the graduation of the effect that you're going to apply. So I'm going to actually make that a little smaller, about like that. And then over here on the right, now you can start to do stuff like you can say, okay, I want the sky to be brighter. So I'll do kind of a bit of an extreme so you can see it. But there I just made just the sky lighter, you know what I mean? Or you can, in this case, maybe make it a little bit darker, like 0.2, give it a little bit more of an ominous look. This case, I think -1 was pretty good. You can adjust the color. So if you want more of a blue tint to it, or you want more of a golden sunset look to it, you can adjust that. I don't really want to adjust that in this. I like what was naturally there, but I am going to just increase the saturation up there just a little bit, maybe to like 12. Or I think I did 15 before, maybe. Oops. Oh, that's too much. That's over processed. So that's what a lot of
It's right
people that
there.
are just starting out. Yeah, that's what they'll do is they accidentally, you know, they're like, wow, look at all that color, man. You know, and I get it, but it's a lot. So anyway, we'll do about 20 on that. Another thing I like to do because of the sun and what was going on there is I'll take my brush and I'm just going to go over this foliage that's in the back on the mountain there, and I'm going to paint some of the areas that are green, and I'm just going to add a little green. I'm going to make the green pop a little more. So I'm just going to paint that in. Is this set to 50% or something? What's going on? Okay, I guess it's fine. So I'm just going to paint in this foliage a little bit. All right, and then there's some down here as well. Paint a little bit of that in. There we go. My flow is low. Now it's going to paint perfectly. There's a little bit of green here. Swing my brush a little bit and do out here. I think that's about it for the green highlights that I'm really worried about. Although there is some, obviously this has some green in it too. So I guess I'll just put a little bit over there, just kind of plop it on there. All right, and then I'll turn that back off. And now I can come over here on the right and I can go to the tint area here and I can pull away. Well, first of all, you can just replace color flat out. Like you could come here and say, oh, I want some blue, you know, and you could actually completely replace color. But we're not going to do that. But I do want to just change the tint a little bit, and I'll just do an extreme so you can see it. So see if I go all the way to the left, see how green it made that? Like it really made the green pop out. And I kind of regret that I didn't do this on my original image because, yeah, I think making the green highlight a little bit is good. And actually that 100 almost looks right, but just to follow my own rule of not doing anything too crazy, let's just bring it over maybe like 60 is good.
Yeah.
So I just brought a little bit of the green back so you can see it, more color contrast. And then, like I said, I do like to do the, wow, I forgot the name of it again. Charlotte, once again, what's the
Vignette.
vignette? Thank you. I don't know why I can't remember that today, but I want to do my vignette, but I'm not going to do that until it's the final image where when I would come into print. So I have one last step to do with this, and that's that if you come in here and look at the grain in the sky. So I don't know if you can see that grain. I zoomed it in. You should be able to see it.
Yeah.
I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to go ahead and take this back out to Noiseware now. So we're going to go ahead and edit that in Photoshop with my adjustments. And then we're going to go to Noiseware. Oh, wait, forgot my rule of always making a layer because I do believe I painted out a little bit of the dock and stuff when I did this last time. All right, so filter, Noiseware. Yeah, because on the dock, you see how you like, I mean, look at what it does to the dock. I'm not a fan of what it does. If you look at this plank versus this plank, like it's kind of trying to smooth away the natural, you know, grooves in the wood. And I don't want that. So that's why we make that layer so we can come back and deal with that later. But you'll notice on the lighthouse, look at the improvement that it does there. You know, the difference in grain on both is huge. And in the sky, you can definitely see the change. Do you see that?
Yes, it's amazing.
So Noiseware is an amazing tool. It's very good. And it's usually good right out of the box. I don't think I messed with the settings for this one at all. Yeah, I even like the default. So I'm not even going to use landscape. I'm just going to leave it default. Yeah, so it's doing a really good job on that. So I'm not going to mess with that. And we can just click and see the difference. If we just press and hold the mouse, you can see it. So that's without the Noiseware applied, and that's with.
Can you zoom it out?
Yep. Now, see, when you zoom out, you might not notice it so much. So again, this is more about, for me, this is more about like if I was going to print it big or for like straight up archival, like my master image, you know,
Right.
this just makes sure that everything's as clean as possible. But
I can see a difference. I do.
yeah, you still see it, especially up here in the clouds. Like if you look, oh, see, I got a little lens spot right there. We're going to clean that out last minute too. But you'll notice when it's off, you can see a little bit like the contrast in the clouds is a little better. And when you turn it back on, it kind of softens that a bit.
Yeah.
So I don't like that part. Like I like the contrast in the clouds there, but I don't like the grain. So I'm going to show you how I deal with that in just a second. So I'm going to save this back to that layer. And the way that I fix what I was just whining about is by having a separate layer and using the mask tool again. So I'm going to take the mask tool, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to color away all of my dock here. And I'm going to be very sloppy with this because it's not something you're going to see if it overlaps a little bit. So it's just a big brush. I don't care how big it is. I'm not worried about it. And I'm just painting that away a little bit so it doesn't mess with my dock. So the dock will be the original. Also, I don't need the smoothing. Actually, I don't need the smoothing in anything down here, really. I pretty much want it just for the clouds. So I'm just going to paint this whole bottom section. Kind of get rid of it. I don't want it to mucky up any of the finer details down here. So there, I kind of painted away all that. Pretty much I wanted it for the clouds and the lighthouse. So just to zoom in and make sure I didn't wipe it away for the lighthouse because I got sloppy there for a minute. Yeah, it's still there. Okay, good. All right, and then the final step, remember I said I liked the contrast, wanted to get rid of the grain though. So in that case, you can actually just change the opacity of this layer. So it's almost like saying, hey, I did Noiseware on it, but now I only want Noiseware to be 70%, you know? So you can just click that, lower the opacity of that layer to 70%. And if we go up to the clouds, you'll notice you get some of that back. So you still lose quite a bit of your grain, but you get a little bit of the contrastiness in the clouds back. So let's just zoom in really good, see how that looks. So I'm comfortable with that amount of grain. I think that's pretty good. See there a little bit. Yeah.
So Lightroom doesn't have any of these fancy plugins, huh?
No, these plugins actually work with Lightroom too. I just, I like the layers. So,
okay, that's the
yeah, if I was willing to just have it go out to, so let me just save this real quick, and then we'll go back. So in Lightroom, you'll see, I'll show you the spot where you can export it right to Noiseware, and that's great. But once you hit I'm done, you can't mask, you can't, I couldn't have wiped out the docs, for example.
right.
When they add layers to Lightroom, that's going to be a real game changer for me and my workflow, because I'll get layers in Lightroom and then, you know, I won't need to use Photoshop so much. Pull this up here. So now this is our newest image.
Right.
And yeah, so there's that. And then there was just this lens spot I noticed up here. I'm going to try to find that again because that's going to drive me crazy. There it was. So you see this little, I don't know if you can even notice it. I'm a freak. I notice all these little, but this is actually some kind of water spot or something on my lens that showed through. So I have to get rid of it. It's going to drive me crazy. Highlight over that. Boop, and it's gone.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So yeah, so that's pretty much it. The only other thing I would do to this now at this point is I would do my vignette. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go, I'll start out 15, see how that looks. Yeah, okay. Well, it might look a little more powerful at my typical 35 that I do. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I also often make the feather more like 65, just so it's real subtle. So you just tweak that to your liking. But that's it. It looks a little different than the one I actually output because, you know, we did it fresh, but I think I added a little more color to the top and whatnot. But, you know, this is all stuff you guys can tweak and do however you like. So that's it. Any questions?
That is so cool.
All right. Well, if you don't have it, Julia, have you ever used Snapseed on your phone? Do you have an iPhone or Android?
I have an iPhone. I drank the apple juice a long time ago.
Okay. So I don't know if Snapseed works on iPhone or not.
Right.
Just look it up. But there's probably other great editing apps for iPhone too. But I've tweaked pictures on tablets and on my phone, and then just never even bothered to do it again in Lightroom just because they came out fine. So you can really do this stuff with multiple tools, but Snapseed's a great tool for your phone.
Yeah, I think Apple has Lightroom, right? For iPads?
Yeah, and Android too. But
yeah.
for whatever reason, I know this is going to sound weird, even though I love Lightroom so much, I've just never gotten into it on my phone. I like Snapseed on my phone for whatever reason, but I do plan to play with it a little more down the road. There's also, you'll also notice I'm using Lightroom Classic. There's a new Lightroom that's not called Classic, and it's a little more like, I don't even know how to describe the difference, but to me, the new Lightroom, it's like a Lightroom Lite, it feels like I feel like some stuff's missing.
Oh.
And that's kind of more or less what's on the phone. I got the same impression when I played with it on the phone. So on the phone, I use Snapseed, and on the computer, I use Lightroom.
Yeah, I have light, and I felt like I was like, where is all of this stuff you're looking at? So I'm gonna grab Classic.
Oh, you just, when you fired it up from your Adobe suite, you fired up Light, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like missing stuff or something. I don't even know what it's for. Like, I don't know why I'll have to go read on Adobe's website and see what they're doing with Light versus Classic. But There's a reason they apparently are keeping classic around, because there's some diehards like me that are like, no. So so they just renamed it classic, and you know, I don't know, maybe they'll eventually get rid of it, but they better make it so I can find all my features if they do that.
So the one thing that I was going to ask, and you went ahead and you were going to take the picture back over to Photoshop. So when you put that one tool that you used to add light above a line but not below a line, you put in
Right.
a, yeah. And you were going to be able to either spread that out and fade it or not spread it out. You made the lines really little
Yeah.
together. What would happen if you took those 3 lines and pulled the top one all the way to the top? What would that do?
I would flip it. So for example, if I'm gonna, let's say I really wanted to lighten everything below the sky, then what I would actually do is just, I would click and draw up when I first start to lay that gradient on the image.
Okay, the gradient. There's the word. You were having trouble with vignette. I can't remember gradient.
Yeah. And if you draw it past, then it just flips which side it does it on. So let me give you an example. I'll just crank the exposure real quick, and you'll see that as I drag this, it flips it up or down.
Okay. And is this I've seen this tool before on another, is there a way like to make it a circle and you can go from the corner and stuff like that?
Good question. I think so. I mean, I do that in Photoshop, you can do that stuff. Let
Okay.
me see if it's in this or not. Hold on. Brush. No, you can do brush. You know, I don't know.
Okay. Just
That's a good question though.
okay.
I'd have to look that up. I've never really used it that way. I've done stuff where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this one, you know, right there, and like I'll get, oh geez, now I'm breaking it. Here we go. Get that where I want, and then I'll be like, oh, the top right corner, I kind of want a little bit more, and I'll draw another gradient. you know, like I've done that a lot.
Okay.
And I'll draw like a second one.
You can go up or down with the gradient, and clearly you can go diagonal. Okay. Oh, look.
Yeah. So like if I just wanted the sun to pop a little more, I mean, I did that extreme just so you can see what it does, but I could always come over here and just go, oh, let's add a little yellow glowy sunset to that, you know?
All right. Nice. Nice.
So you can flip it and make it work in whatever direction you want. And then you can just see the difference in how hard the gradient works.
Okay.
So it's either a real short distance it goes and then the gradient's in full effect, or it's a long distance.
I see. Okay, good. Good, good, good. Yeah. Usually when I'm going to play with the colors, I do that in Procreate.
Why? I've never heard of that one. Is it an Apple app?
It's an Apple app. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, like I said, a lot of this stuff should apply to like whatever app you're using. You know, when you talk about contrast, exposure, colors, hues, you know, gradients, like all that stuff should apply to other apps.
Sure. No, but I really liked, I love the way that this one works. I've never had anyone really show me Lightroom before, so I'm going to have to go play.
Yeah, and I mean the subscription from Adobe for this is very inexpensive. So you can get Photoshop and Lightroom and a few other apps actually pretty inexpensively for like, I think maybe it's $10 a month or something, or
Well, that's
I'm not sure.
doable. And
yeah, but it's not super expensive. So
if you're shooting with a big old camera, you should have the good stuff to play with.
yeah, and I mean I do use this as literally my master library for all my photos. So all of my work is always kept in these you know, whatever it is all kept in the in this app. So everything lives inside of Lightroom.
I know that little girl.
What's that?
I know that little girl.
Oh, Jen?
No, the pup.
Oh, yeah, that's Pixel. Or Draper, maybe. Was that Draper? I don't know. Where to go?
That's
yeah,
okay.
That's Draper.
Sweet baby.
He's a good boy.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
No problem.
Absolutely.
If you have any questions, just let me know, and you know, I'd love.
I know where to find you.
Yeah, you know how to find me. It's pretty easy. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.